remind him. And so
Yeah, we'll reach out to him now.
Okay, I'll go ahead and open the McMinnville Water and Light Commission meeting, May the 19th, 2020. And we're conducting this meeting electronically via Zoom, and it'll be live streamed on the YouTube of McMinnville Media. And so I'll turn it over to Trina to do a roll call.
Mayor Hill,
Here.
Commissioner Tankersley,
Here.
Commissioner Gormley,
Here.
Commissioner Fuchs, and Commissioner Christensen are excused.
Okay.
Excuse me, Mr. Mayor, I had a little note on mine that says, oh, now we are on YouTube again. It went away, but now it's back. Okay.
Okay. Yeah, I pulled it up earlier and I saw that it was starting. So
Great.
That takes us to our first area of business this evening, which is the consent agenda, minutes of our previous meeting of April 21st, 2020, and energy efficiency support services. Is there any commissioner that would like to take anything off the consent agenda this evening?
No, and I would, if everyone's okay, I'd move for the adoption of the consent agenda.
Mr. Mayor, I have a question about the second item. And I wonder if we could take that off and.
Okay.
Okay. So let's go ahead and then we'll just leave the minutes on the consent agenda. And we have a motion with the with just that area. Do I have a second?
Second.
It's been moved and seconded. All in favor of accepting the consent agenda with item A, the minutes of the previous meeting dated April 21st, 2020, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Let's, Tom, we'll just take that down to our new business and make it the first item on new business.
Great, thank you.
We have accounts payable and purchasing reports. Any questions for Mark off of that?
No, I have none.
No question.
Okay, let's move down then to our consultant and partner report. Brent, you're on the line. Could you give us your report for this evening?
Yep, you bet. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Well, as we move through this crisis, many sawmills have continued to curtail operations and be closed intermittently and be open certain days. And, it's been pretty volatile and erratic as far as the sawmills go. But as far as this year's program at the watershed, it's really normal, and we've been insulated from all of these issues, partially because we have timber sales under contract versus, open purchase orders. And, if we were doing polls now, it'd be in a lot riskier situation. But on any event, we're in great shape. Herbert and Frank's mills have both remained completely open through this entire situation, but they're planning on harvesting all their sales this year. So that's great. The 721 road sale, which was a 2019 sale, is nearly complete. All the cutting and logging is done, and now they're just hauling, weather permitting. A lot of the wood is down the 720 road, which is a dirt road that's never been rocked, and it's just a summertime road, so they can't haul off of it till it dries out quite a bit. So for now, they're just, wood is decked, and they have a machine waiting to load logs as the weather permits here. So that's no problem, and the majority of it's logged and hauled. So, and you can see the estimated volumes and values there, and I think we're going to come out real close, if not over the original estimate. Rocking of the first 4 roads, or first 4 miles of the 100 road and the entire 700 road, that was the main project for that sale, and that's complete. Moving on to 2020 sales, the 107 Road, Lule Timber has just begun cutting on that sale this month for Frank Lumber. And the Boundary 300 Bald Mountain Road sale, which is 3 units. 2 of the units are in progress. They've completed cutting Bald Mountain Road unit and are continuing to cut on the 300 Road unit and hauling off of both of those areas. They're not sure when they'll start the Boundary Road unit of that sale, but for right now, they're on track to do all that this year. That is a 2-year contract, but the plan is still to get that done this year. So we'll see how that goes. And we've done some slashing and pre-commercial thinning projects associated with that sale, and those are complete now, which is good ahead of fire season. So that's what I have on that sale. I would mention that hauling's going really well, and we're almost completed hauling out the Bald Mountain Bald Mountain Road out High Heaven through McMinnville that way, and that, of course, was our alternate route, and we didn't have to go down to Sucker Road, and that's worked out no problem. So
Good.
everything's going really well.
Have we heard any more from BLM?
No.
No.
Brent, I have
I
one.
haven't heard anything.
Brent, I have one question for you.
Sure.
Are we going to need to do a contract next year for rock? Using quite a bit of rock.
That was something I was going to approach at some point. That's likely. We're getting pretty well down there, but at the same time, we've rocked a lot of roads, so we still have some material left. We won't need to do a lot of rocking next year anywhere because of pretty substantial undertaking this year of rocking. So,
Okay.
but I'll look at that at the end of this year, and we probably will look at crushing some more rock. I think it'd be a good idea, and I think we try to do it every 5 years. I think it'll be 4 years since the last crushing project, I think, next year. So, yeah, that'd be good to anticipate. We're probably going to want to do that.
Okay.
Yeah, I would clarify on the, when you asked the question about hearing from BLM, you actually have in your materials a letter from the district manager. It's at page 158. So we haven't heard anything. I guess that I think our kind of knee-jerk response was we haven't heard anything different. That letter pretty much, I think, again, recites their position. But it was sent on May 1st, so it did come after the last meeting.
Great, thank you.
Oh, okay. I hadn't seen that. Okay, interesting. Okay. Yeah, so we have that option. That road has worked real well for us, and they're nearly complete, so no problem there. One thing with the rock supply too, we did the additional 4 miles of rocking this year, and then also there's that building above the treatment plant going to be constructed that Doug put a pad in there and used quite a bit of rock there too. So
Yeah.
We've used a little more than our average amount of rocking, which explains where it's gone. So
Okay.
Any other questions for Brent?
I just looking at the letter, the last paragraph. Do we respond to this, Sam, or just leave it alone?
I've not responded to it. I guess I don't affirmatively recommend any response.
Okay. Okay, just curious. Okay, thank you.
Brent, thank you for the report, and it looks like things are moving along given some of the weather constraints we've had with the rain, but sounds great.
yeah,
Okay,
no, things are going really well, and so thanks a lot. I'll see you next month.
Bye-bye.
Thank
Take
you.
care.
Thanks, Brent.
You bet. Bye-bye.
our next item is appearance requests, and I do not see any. taking us to staff reports. And James, will you present the information on the Lafayette finished water transmission main project?
Sure. Good evening. How are you?
Great.
So for many, I'm sure you guys have been out there driving by the Lafayette finished water main project. What you see out there now is the majority of the pipe is in the ground. So we have the HDPE pipe, all of it's in the ground with the exception of 370 feet, which is behind the guardrail. And there's the interties out there on the west and east ends. So things are moving along pretty well on the construction side of things. We are 41% complete on an earned value basis. I expect another pay request to come in probably tomorrow or so, which will probably push us up to around 75% complete on an earned value basis. We had a couple issues in regards to delays tied to valves because of the whole COVID-19, but it sounds like we're getting that worked out. We are having 7 valves delivered tomorrow, so they'll start installing valves tomorrow on the job site. We still look like we're going to be having water being able to be delivered to Lafayette by June 30th. So that's our goal. We're in coordination with Lafayette and their pump station project, so we're moving in that direction. So looking ahead, we have installation of valves starting this week. We're going to be pulling the pipe through the casing out there, which is 370 feet of just slip lining that pipe, and then doing the interties. And then for the month of June, we're going to be looking at testing and commissioning the pipe there. So things are going well on that side of things. I'm happy with the progress we're making. There will be a number of change orders that we're going to be talking about probably next commission meeting. Some of them are credit, some of them are cost, but I think overall we're going to look pretty good. But there's a couple of them still in the works. Some of it has to do with ODOT and it's tied to some work behind the guardrail because we had some issues with slope stabilization, and that has yet to be figured out yet. But we're in the works of getting those figured out, and I hope to have more information for you at the next commission meeting.
Hey, Patrick. So James, I have a vague recollection that one of the things we talked about was in the contract is that if the price changed more than a certain amount, we either had to have Lafayette's consent or something could happen. Are we anywhere near that, or do I not remember it right?
Well, you're near that. It's in the whole water sale agreement is in there, and there's a section on change orders. And basically at this point, we're just keeping Lafayette on notice of what the change orders are. At this point, I mean, as of today, right now, if we were going to end the project, we'd be $35,000 or so under budget. So we're looking good that way. We had some issues out there in regards to shoring and installing that steel casing behind the guardrail. So that hasn't been worked out yet. We have some information going over to ODOT. But to answer your question, yes, there are some triggers in the agreement for change orders, and we are keeping.
We're not going to get anywhere near those triggers. Is that?
I don't think so. I mean, at this point, it's so early to tell on the ODOT side of things. I don't think we're going to get near those triggers. Our goal is to keep it at the original award amount. We have some cost change orders that will hopefully offset some of those cost change orders. So we'll see how things kind of break out. I should know more next week, but as of today, I mean, it's pretty early in the game to figure out the cost. Anytime you work with things with slope stabilization around a guardrail and creeks, it has a tendency to get a little expensive. So we're working with ODOT. They've been helpful in trying to get this issue resolved. So at this point, I don't have a whole lot of information in regards to cost, except as of today, we're under budget and we're moving forward. So
Okay.
And
Right.
And Sam may have some more information in regards to the actual contract itself.
right, the contract actually has pretty strong language. It gives us pretty broad discretion to make contract price adjustments that are deemed presumptively reasonable and necessary. So we've got good discretion built into the contract to make reasonable change orders. There are limits that were built around the bid. So if the bid had come in over a certain price, Lafayette could jump out of it. But we've got good contractual language, I think, to protect us in the contract, which will be fair to Lafayette. But I think we're covered.
Great. Thank you.
Ed?
So James, Mr. Mayor, through James, the change orders, are they related to the work in the right of way then, or are there more than one change order?
I mean, there's a number of change orders, there's a number of credit change orders. I mean, it goes from replacing there's some large ones, like ones for, it's gonna be time and materials, but we actually encountered some fiber optics out in the field there. We had to change the alignment, go out into the asphalt on the shoulder. That's about a $50,000 change order. With our credits, we had some credits that offset that. We eliminated some of the stuff within some of the components within our system and made some of those offsets. We did some substitution requests based on the contractor's request for CDF versus sand. There's another change order then there for CDF for crushed rock. And then there's just alignment change orders. With the COVID-19, ODOT's permit got changed. When it went out to bid, we weren't in this whole world of COVID-19. As soon as the COVID-19 came out, the permit changed a bit in regards to the contractor requested by ODOT. We sat down and had a meeting, and they wanted to basically do day work along the shoulder of the highway. Now, that would not traditionally be allowed, but under the circumstances with the, no one out there, basically, ODOT made that exception for them. So the alignment got changed. That benefited us and them in regards to making that alignment closer to the edge of pavement and away from the wetlands. And that's another change order there. But a lot of those are.
So is that a credit to us for them doing day work rather than night work?
That is a credit. That's one of the credits. There's a credit for changing the elevations, because when we went out there, they were going to be excavating deeper in some areas. So we're working through credits on those. All the pipe was surveyed in. So we take the original drawings based on what they actually put in the ground, and we ask for a credit on that.
So the fiber optic, was that something engineers should have known about, or?
Well, it was something that was missed. I'm not saying these are things that we come across. When you look down the road, it looks like it would go in a straight line, but for some unfortunate reason, when they were installing the fiber, it made a large S shape over 250 feet, which caused some issues with installing the pipe.
Can you do a locate on the fibers though?
You could if you pothole them, sure. I mean, we potholed, but we didn't pothole that location there. We potholed off to the side there.
So the engineer has no liability in this, is what you're saying?
I'm not saying that. I'm saying it was a construction change order. It was a missed utility out there. We pushed that off in the actual specifications. It says that the responsibility to go out there, they had to do their due diligence, meaning the contractor, to locate all the utilities. So we pushed that piece off onto the contractor. They went out there and they started excavating in regards to like vectoring out with a vector truck certain locations to identify, making sure the alignment was free of utilities. And during that process there, that 250 feet, we noticed, based on the information we got back from K&E, that the conduit, instead of going straight, curved. And I'm not sure why it curved, but it curved. We addressed that change within a day. It wasn't any stoppage of time. ODOT was great to work with in regards to getting things sorted out on that. We got the changes done and got the pipe in the ground.
Okay, good. Thank you, James.
Yep.
Any other questions for James? Hearing none, then we will move on to old business, and I show no old business. And so, Tom, let's go back up to our consent agenda and let's take a look at the Efficiency Service Group Service Agreement. And it sounds like you had a question or two on that, Tom.
Yeah, I had one question. Everything made sense, but I want to be sure that we're certain that BPA will have the programs for the next 5 years that we will need these services for. Is the BPA program set in stone for the next 5 years, absent some major unforeseen change?
You want to take that one, Jamie, or you want me to?
You can go ahead.
So the answer is, I would say yes, because the Northwest Power and Conservation Council, that is energy efficiency is their #1 resource. So basically that is what they are looking at to add resources into the energy mix generation.
Sam, would it just be overkill if we added something that said if the BPA program materially changes or reduces, we can cancel this?
Well, I'm not, I don't have these contracts memorized, so it would not surprise me if we had language in there already
Oh,
that
okay.
allows us to terminate, but um,
If we don't, could we, does that sound, they would understand that, right? I'm just glancing at the index anyway.
I'm trying to see if I could find the contract document.
Says they have a one-time setup fee.
Yeah, I don't think we got the contract document. I think we got their
We just,
proposal, right?
No, I know, I'm looking in my files to see if I can see it.
Thank you. Well, I mean, I would be,
We have a 30-day right to terminate.
oh, that's
Okay.
awesome then. Okay, thank you. Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Okay,
I'm willing to move to make the award. Do we need to make any findings since it was only one party that bid, Sam?
Well, there's in the document, I think if you had approved in the consent agenda, we would adopt findings. There's a most advantageous finding. This is a formal RFP for services. It was formally advertised. We only had one respondent. I was just sticking the mud. I told the staff to go ahead and go through the whole process and score it. We never had one of these scored kind of full blown before. So we did all the bells and whistles, even though we had only one contractor. And frankly, it was a contractor we've had for the last 10 years. Jamie, is that right? ESG, we've had them for a long time already. So we're very familiar with them. But the finding is it's most advantageous is the magic words to water and light.
And so this staff report is that finding?
Yes, it contains, I believe it does, contains factual support for that finding. And that's the recommendation is that I think that Mr. Hudson makes is that it's in his memo, I believe.
And this, I mean, the price makes sense to staff?
Yeah,
Yeah, and I think I had Mr. Hudson, he included some price history, I believe, in the document.
We did.
Yeah.
So based on the staff report and the other documentation, I would move that we make the required finding as described by council and that we award this contract subject to no protest being filed.
And you'd be authorizing the mayor and the clerk to sign. We'll understand the motion.
Authorizing the mayor and the clerk to sign.
Thank you.
any further discussion?
I'll second the motion.
So we have a second, we have a first, we have a motion and a second. All in favor, please indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? And so that recommendation to award energy contract is passed unanimously. That takes us down to new business. And our first item is the COVID response update number 3 from John. And I know John and staff have been sending out almost daily updates as to how we're doing, but this is a formalized report number 3. John?
sure. So as you can see, staffing, construction has we've continued pretty much as normal. Construction front office still remains closed. You'll notice that the biggest shift is in credit card transactions. And then I added a section on financial impacts for the utility. You can see that Customers Helping Customers Fund for April 2020 over April 2019. And then you can also see the arrears we have from April 2020 versus 2019 has also started to grow. And then actually the last section there is the total fees that have been waived to date. So those are running a roughly $43,000 a month in fees that have been waived. And then probably lastly, I also added in our COVID back to work plan. Staff had updated or built this plan based on some models we had obtained. And the last item here is a resolution for the commission to extend the emergency through the June 17th, our next meeting.
I'd so move.
Second.
Before, a little discussion here first. Sam, I saw something in the Oregonian this morning about a judge in Baker County, I think, had ruled that the governor can only have an emergency declaration for 30 days, and the Oregon Supreme Court had stayed that order. Should we worry about that here? Is there something else we should do, like start over, or how?
I don't think so. We're operating under the statute that provides for emergency declarations. So, there's certain things we have limited jurisdiction. There are very limited things we can do. Our jurisdiction relates to water and electricity. So,
And
I don't.
I'm sorry, go ahead. There's no 30-day limit on our authority to do this?
No, I don't think there is, no. And I don't pretend to understand the arguments made in Baker County. But that's going to be litigated. So, but you certainly have authority over the water and electric system, and to make, I think, as a local government and as a unit of local government, to make an emergency declaration like this.
And I understand that the state has going to take this up with the Oregon Supreme Court on fast track so that they can resolve this as soon as possible.
Yeah, I read that in the paper this morning, and they'd stayed the ruling. So,
yeah.
Did you read the basis for it? It's really tied to some religious people dealing with religious issues about not being able to hold services.
Yeah. Right. But then one of the other ones that I read, and again, I just read the newspaper report, it did say something about one of their theories was the governor only had authority to declare a 30-day emergency.
Yeah, is it a 28-day provision?
Oh, okay. But first of all, I don't think, anyway, yes. So.
I suppose somebody can come up with a theory how they're being injured by our office. Our office is not being open to the public, but I think we're.
Well, I think we as a commission, don't we have the authority to do that with or without an emergency declaration?
I think so. Yes, I think so. I think it's just be a real stretch to find an injury based on what you've done as part of this resolution.
Right, and I don't think there's any competing interest that we're stepping on here.
And we have not failed to operate fully. I mean, so.
You've succeeded in operating fully. Thank you.
Do we have a resolution number? It's 2020-13. So it's 2020-13 resolution by the state of McMinnville Municipal Corporation of the State of Oregon, acting by and through its Water and Light Commission, declaring and extending the state of emergency with regard to operation of the water and light plants of the city of McMinnville. That's read by title only.
I move adoption of the resolution.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded. Trina, can you pull the commission?
Mayor Hill,
Yes.
Commissioner Tankersley,
Yes.
Commissioner Gormley,
Yes.
Commissioner Fuchs.
Yes.
And so resolution 2020 was that 13, Trina? Has passed unanimously 4-0. Thank you. Let's move down to the next item that we have, and that's the presentation of the fiscal 2021 budget review. And I'll turn it over to Mark. Mark?
Thank you. Good evening, commissioners. So this budget review just includes the light and water divisions, does not include fiber. Fiber, we've been working on a cost of service model, and also just with the differences that we're doing this year with our budget, and some of the adjustments we've made related to COVID-19, we just kind of ran out of time. So we focused on these two budgets, and we'll bring the fiber budget along with an alternative cost of service back in the next meeting for commission review and consideration. We've also summarized in the staff report some of the COVID-19 related costs, both cost increases, revenue reductions. The numbers there are a bit different than what John presented, and I think part of that may just be in timing of the way I did my estimating out of the general ledger, as opposed to number of transactions, say that we processed for card payments, that kind of thing. So I'll be doing some more kind of fine tuning of those numbers, but at least that gives some idea, at least of what I have in the budget related to these costs, because they're kind of spread out in the budget. So this budget, like I mentioned, it's different. It represents our change to departmental reporting. And I thought I would maybe start at the back of the document this year because of how different this process has been for us to develop the budget, and the view certainly is different too. So, and the back of the budget, the departmental expenses, they relate to both water and light operating.
Do we go to the last pages of the budget then?
Yeah, I'd say I think my page numbers are consistent with yours. Page 45 is the first page of the line item expenses for each of the departments.
Correct.
So yeah, if you flip back to those, you can see each of the departments represented on these as you go through the pages. And then what you'll see is both the water and light expense line items kind of combined or presented next to each other, particularly in departments where, say, administration, finance, others will have both water and light expenses in their budget. And so it almost looks like when you first look at this, like lines are duplicated, but they're actually not. One line is for the light division, one line is for the water division. And the total of those two is typically what a department head would think about when they're doing budgeting. So if I'm going to budget training expense for my department, well, part of that's going to get charged out to light, part's going to get charged to water. And so to do this kind of a view, and we've been talking about this at our updates, we recoded our data all the way back to fiscal year 17-18, which isn't actually shown in this document. There just wasn't quite enough room to do that. But that was part of what we used to help estimate 2021. So we had all of 17-18, 18-19, and 7 months of 19-20, current year we're in now, through January. And we recoded all that data in this new methodology, which consisted of combining or basically separating out all of our payroll costs, which largely were spread across multiple different expense accounts with other types of expenses. We pulled them out and put them into their own line for each financial statement category. And so that's highlighted in this back section in kind of a light gray, so you can kind of pick up the new labor accounts. So we pulled those expenses out, put them in their own line, and then we also created several new accounts to, again, separate out expenses that are combined with other expenses in the budget that we really intuitively wanted to kind of have highlighted out or in their own lines. So for example, like fuel used to be included in vehicle expense. We pulled that out, made a fuel GL account. And then our transaction history, we look for all the fuel account or expenses in the detail, pulled them out of vehicle expense, put them in this new fuel expense line. So we did that for a number of things: safety training, safety expense and PPE, community outreach and promotion, security equipment, banking services. And then we added a new one this year because of our COVID-19 situation where we're not charging customers the $3.95 fee. We have a new credit card processing GL account. So all that gets represented in these departments. And so we went through, the department heads participate in this. You know, it's a bit of a struggle for us this year. I definitely worked on this at length just by looking at lots of detail and to do the estimating. But ultimately, all of these expense lines, they roll up into the numbers that you see in the expense schedules, which are just behind the summary schedules for water and light. So, and those have been there historically. For water, or I'm sorry, for light, they're on pages 11 through 14, and water 28 through 31. So those are familiar to you. And we'll talk about those in just a bit when we get there. But I just wanted to highlight this, indicating some notes on, yeah.
An observation that I've made as we're going through those department expense details. Thank you. I mean, it reads like what I've typically have been looking for. And, you know, I had some questions, but I can go over to your notes. Specifically, last night we spent about 5 hours on the city budget at our budget committee. And one of the areas that we had a long discussion about was training, conference, and travel. But I look at your notes and you've already cut those by about 50% in those categories. And it's a part of that document. And, you know, no turkey rama, it's right there. So not only do you have the numbers, but you have notes that help understand those details. One question that I wasn't able to get my hands around completely, you know, as we've put the office on limited hours and limited people in, are we having a savings of office individuals being in the office and running, you know, our office at full scale as compared to where we are with a skeleton crew right now? And then the second question, as we've had, you know, a third of our staff at home, are we offsetting some of the costs that they are incurring in the office, i.e. paper, ink with their printers and those types of things?
That's a good question. So yes, we are having fewer people at the office. In terms of the impact of that, say to supplies and consumables and that kind of stuff, that wasn't something that we factored into our estimating. That's something that we could potentially go back and look at. I don't really have a sense as to whether or not there's significant changes in those expenses. But as far as I guess the other question is, was your other question related to maybe payroll? Is there payroll differences because of this?
Not necessarily payroll. I'm guessing, you know, running the office with lights and all of the overhead that typically runs, you know, I don't know what that typical cost would be, but, you know, with only having a handful in the office, do we have a significant savings by not utilizing the office at its full tilt?
I guess my my initial kind of knee-jerk thought on it would be that the savings, if there are some, would probably be negligible. I mean, just my recollection of just walking around, lights are on throughout the office. The utilities are going to be pretty consistent. You know, it would probably be in supplies. And I don't know that that's going to be a significant change, but potentially less.
Well, one of the things I would add too is we've done a lot more electronic stuff over the last 2 or 3 years. So there, we probably have had a very gradual decrease in that number just over time. But, we're also only 2 months into this too, so it's really hard to tell what it's going to do here in the long term.
Well, if you haven't laid any personnel off, you really are, your costs are going to be pretty static then.
Yeah, we have not done that. We aren't going to probably hire any summer help just because of the timing and the conflicts it would bring with having to have more staff back here. We're not ready for that yet, and we probably won't be for quite some time.
One of our learnings last night at the city level is that we, for the very first time, built into our budget a 6-month review, knowing that come October, November, we're going to have a much better idea, at least at the city level, because the tax assessments are going to be in, and that's primarily where we're getting our money. But that would be something I know Mark is going to be looking at this very carefully with his staff on a month-by-month basis, so that if we do need to tweak the budget, we can be ahead of that curve and know kind of where we're at. But definitely at a 6-month level, I think it'd be a great thought to have a review and come back to the commission to show us actual budget as to any changes that the realities of the COVID-19 and the coming back into a full swing of business, what that looks like.
And remember, on the electric side, the biggest driver for us is our BPA cost. So it'll be tied to that. Our budget for the electric will pretty much be tied to that forecast.
Right.
I agree with the mayor, but I also wouldn't want staff to spend, a huge block of time doing this to give us if you don't already have it. Does that make sense?
Yep.
So if you have it, you could just tell us, kind of help us understand what you have, because I think you give us the financials every month anyway, but.
We do.
We should have it pretty close.
Great, but I would rather not have staff spend, days and days on this, because I know you're busy anyway, so.
Well, and as John indicated, our product is electric and water, and they're going to be fairly consistent.
Great. Thank you.
So page 44 is a new schedule as well. It just summarizes expenses and compares by department, and then compares them to the prior year with some notes again on the changes. One thing that I thought was kind of interesting is that visual summary. I mean, you can see that purchase power and transmission dominate our operational budget. And so, and then a few notes there highlighted on, where the percentage changes are kind of where they jump out at you because they're just different than what would be expected, and a few notes to that. So I thought maybe I would move into, unless there's some specific questions on these, all this detail, I would move into again, this is something that relates to both budgets, the payroll costs and FTE that we've included in our draft budget. So if you want to go to page 40, so this schedule we've had in previous budgets, we're able, because of how we're budgeting now, we're able to provide a little bit more detail, which has been helpful. We can compare on that schedule, salaries and taxes and all the benefits and the totals, and then by division, current year to prior year. And then with those changes are detailed above. And so I thought I would just kind of hit those briefly here. Like John mentioned, we don't have included in this budget the seasonal or intern positions that we had in the prior year, which is a 1.5 FTE reduction. We also anticipate the completion of a 1-year succession planning position in the water treatment department through retirement. So there's a reduction there of not quite, just about 1 FTE based on the timing of that. And then some changes in the line department related to, we've been working to fill a lineman position, and this next year, since we haven't been able to fill the lineman position outright, we're instead going to take the approach to hire an apprentice, and if that position comes from a groundman position, then we would backfill a groundman position. So we end up net with about a 0.5 FTE increase there. And then also in our accounting department, we anticipate a retirement in fiscal year 2021 near the end of the year. And so we wanted to bring an additional position into the department for succession planning for that transition. So total FTE change is a 0.92 FTE reduction, and you can see that in the schedules, which are new this year on pages 41 through 43. So quite a bit more detail presented around payroll and FTE than what we've had in the past as well, with the new way that we're able to budget by department. So any questions about any of that information?
Did you project any kind of wage increase, or were you leaving things flat, or?
We had in there a 3% cost of living increase, just kind of as a starting point, based on the Portland, section of Portland. It's the West, I can't remember exactly what it's called, but it's the one we're using now for the cost of living. It was just under 3%, so we put a 3 in there, and step increases for those that aren't on those that are on the pay plans that have steps, and for those that aren't, a 3% merit increase. So increases are there. Also a 5.5% increase on healthcare that begins in January of 2021. So that was announced at our insurance conference back in March. So
have you received any word about any additional numbers coming out on PERS that we have to bump our?
So not for next year. It's a biennium that they set rates for. So we're in the year where there's no change.
Year. Okay.
Yeah. The fiscal year 21-22, we did a cost escalator of 6.5% on payroll that year. Normally we do a 3.5%. So yeah, on the PERS increase years, we bumped that up. So you'll see that in the out year projections. Anything else on any of those items? If not, then I'll just go ahead and flip back to the front of the document, to the light section. And I won't really detail the narrative that starts on page 3, other than just to indicate that if you look at the FTE narrative on page 4, or the FTE chart that's included in narrative on page 4, compare that to those schedules in the back that we just talked about, they're going to be a little different, only because this chart includes just employees that are assigned directly to the light division. So it doesn't include like the admin positions or finance or say facilities, because they're split between both divisions. So the only exception is a couple of folks that work both in the water and the light department. They're like shared employees between those two departments in engineering. So, but other than that, they're all directly report to those divisions specifically. So, and then the department heads updated the accomplishments and goals with some detail that's both been done this year and that they anticipate for next year. So as far as on the next page, the key assumptions, that just explains kind of what's behind the numbers that we get into in the budget summary. So for light, we've indicated there was a rate increase in October. Actually, I had it at 3% in the document. It was not that. It was really 1.9%. I was thinking it was just under 3% for residential, but the overall rate increase was 1.9. So I'll need to update that for the next version we look at. But we did have consumption increase. So overall, we did have an increase in our revenues over the prior year. For the next year, 2021 and forward, there's no rate increases included in those numbers, just load forecasts. And on the expense side for purchase power and transmission, fiscal year 2021 includes a financial reserve surcharge of about $511,000. That wasn't included in the future years simply because we don't know what that amount is going to be. So, and then there's some other personnel related things that are detailed there that we just talked about, so I won't go over those. So, so as far as the numbers themselves on pages in the summary 7 through 9, you noticed pretty quickly with the revenue changes and the out years not being, there's really, particularly in 21, 22 and 22, 23, there's actually revenue reductions anticipated because of forecasted load changes. And so as a result, you see on the next page, on page 8, we end up with operating losses beginning next budget year, 21-22 of 127, just under 128,000, and then increasing significantly throughout the projection. So, rate increases are probably necessary to address the operating side of this if those costs are to, or those losses are to be, certainly expense cuts could assist, but not to the level likely that you would need. Yeah.
Could you please help me understand why we think we're going to have less power purchased during those years, then it jumps up in 23, 24?
I might defer to Jamie if that's okay. She's the mastermind behind the revenues and the BPA expense costs.
Sure. So BPA rate periods are 2 years at a time, and in turn we revise the load forecast for the coming rate period. And so that the forecasted loads for 21, 22 and 22, 23 have been recently adjusted downward. Beyond that, it's that is the forecast that our customers have provided, our industrial customers, and have not yet been adjusted downward by BPA. So the near term have been adjusted downward by BPA for the rate period, but that just hasn't carried out for the 5-year.
So to make sure I understand, we're thinking that our business customers are going to, and commercial customers are going to use less power because there's not going to be as much activity because of the.
It's mainly driven by our 2 industrial customers.
Okay.
That load difference.
Okay, great. Okay, thank you.
So as far as the other non-operating costs, so you can see there was a pretty good change in interest income, what we're estimating this year versus what we're budgeting for next year, 712,000 this year to just under 500,000 next year. And that's the result of just budgeting for lower interest rates. We're probably going to average just under 2% this year because of the way the rates have been for most of the year as they're coming down now. And so we budgeted 1.25 next year, and then slowly bump that up over the rate of rest of the projection in terms of rates coming back up. So the intermediate fund, we left that at about a 3% across the years, including next year. We were running a little over 4% this year. So one other thing that I did want to mention, and this is an operating couple of changes that I needed to that I saw as I reviewed this yesterday and today. One of them, there's a line there that says market value adjustment of RECs, but there's no numbers in the budget. So just in the course of doing this, I failed to, at the end of, I recognized that we needed to add a line for that because we did have a write down of our RECs in fiscal year 18-19, but then I spaced putting the number in. So it was an just under $828,000 write down in 18-19. So that drops our net income to about 3.1 million in 18-19. As far as our cash flow goes, though, that was a non-operating or a non-cash expense. And so it didn't change the ending cash balance that year. So, and then the other item that I noticed, which I thought was interesting, talked with Jamie this morning about this. So if you go back to page 7, the in lieu of tax number, so you notice in 18-19, it was like 1.868 million, and then it drops to 1.854 million, yet the revenue increased. It didn't make sense. So we looked into that and figured out that, so we used for 18-19, we have, at the time we did the budget, we had 7 months, try that again, 9 months of actual expenses in there. And then we had to estimate the last 3 months, April through June. And I did not have the correct estimates in there for our industrials. So that bumps that up when I fixed that to 1.959 million. So that's a better number. So you'll see those changes in the document that we review in June. I just wanted to mention those now. So, the expense schedules that are on pages 11 through 14, we've kind of talked about them a little bit by virtue of talking about the department schedules in the back. The one thing that you'll notice here, I think better than what you see in the back schedules. So if you're on page 11 and you look at the first line there, labor distribution operation. So you can see that in 18-19, we have no actual expenses in that labor general ledger account because it didn't exist. This is one of the new accounts we've created. And so there's a bunch of labor that gets spread across several different accounts that ultimately ends up in 18-19 in this new GL account. And so as you go down the budget and you're kind of comparing expenses, some of them look like they're way different 18-19 to 19-20, and that's why is because we pulled the labor out of those accounts and we put them into these new accounts. So that I guess that's maybe one more thing I'll mention on page 12. There's another labor account. It's 590. Labor distribution maintenance. That labor category actually didn't exist in I'm sorry, I'm wrong. It was there. It was in substations. That's where most of the labor was in that category, was substations, and now it's included in this new labor account. So anyway, so that's the kind of stuff that we went through in kind of reviewing these numbers after they rolled up. So is there any questions related to these numbers at all? So far in the light budget? If not, I'll flip to capital. We can talk about that real quick and then go to the water budget. So the capital budget starts on page 15 for light, and some of the big items this coming year, 2021, the construction of an additional transformer bay for $1.5 million, and then a couple of general plant related items. And this would be these are actually from other schedules, both facilities and equipment or transportation equipment. Transportation equipment includes a transmission bucket truck and a puller for $485,000, and then for that $603,000, and then in the next year $648,000. Both of those are largely related to the new fuel station.
What page are you on, Mark?
I'm sorry, page 18.
Okay, I didn't get there. Okay, sorry.
So total capital that we're anticipating to capitalize for fiscal year 2021 is $5.4 million. Cash outflow for that, we're estimating $3.5 million. So that's the capital budget for light. And I guess kind of what I had to talk about for light. Is there any questions related to that on light budget? Anything you want to talk
So
about?
John, if we had to squeeze down a little bit, is there anything in there that you would see we could push off?
Yeah, there are a few things we could squeeze down a little bit. I think for one, the fuel station that's higher than what it'll end up being, I think, based on some estimates we got. There might be some other things we can look at too.
The truck we need for sure this year, or?
The truck, I think, would be one that I would keep. The puller tensioner, we may push those out if we have to. The other thing we're looking at is buying used on those pieces of equipment as well. So it'd help reduce the cost. So those are some of the things we're looking at there.
And what substation is the transformer bay addition in?
Baker Creek.
Okay, we got big loads out there, so okay.
Yeah, we've already purchased the transformer too. So we already have that transformer here in the yard.
Okay. Thank you.
Yeah. So for water, if we want to move to water, that's starts on page 20. Again, the narrative, page 21, 22, and 23. Quite a bit of detail on the accomplishments and goals for water. A lot of good information there. Again, like I mentioned on the chart there on page 22, detailing FTE, this is just related to personnel directly assigned to the water division. So you can see that there was a decrease there from what was filled last year to what we anticipate this year, 2021. So as far as the key points and assumptions for water, so we did this is on page 24, we did a 5-year rate design for water in fiscal year 18-19. And the first 2 years included a 3.1% rate increase, 18-19 and 19-20. So those have been done. The future years of the rate design included 3% rate increases. Those aren't included in the budget. So fiscal year 2021 and on don't include any rate increases since that's, those get done at the direction of the commission and we don't put those in. to the budget. And we did include a small growth factor, but other than that, there's no increases related in the water division for revenues. We did have, however, a couple of new revenue line items that we included. One of them was actually included in miscellaneous income because the volume used to be pretty small, but it's grown, and particularly when it's the bulk fill station, when we created that, revenues jumped on that. And so we've got a separate line item on the revenue section, which is on page 27 for bulk fill, and also a wholesale revenue line that would account for the water sold to Lafayette. So those two revenue amounts are new as part of the water revenues. So there is an increase related to those. So on the expenses, we've talked a lot about the changes in personnel that drives costs there. So I won't go through that. You will see, however, and I'll point these out when we get into, maybe we can just go there now. If we go to page 25 on the summary page, as you look at the revenues and expenses, the operating expenses, you see in 1920, the year we're now, we're anticipating a $155,000 loss. This is something that we had anticipated last year. We actually had it higher in last year's budget, and it was related to an FTE increase for succession planning. There was another one as well. It was an ongoing position, a water quality specialist position that was added. That succession planning position comes out in 2021, and then if you notice on the water supply and then also distribution in year 21, 22, on that page 25, you'll see that there's a reduction on the supply and transmission expense, and a very minimal, just like $6,000 increase, $7,000 increase year to year for distribution system costs. And that's because of retirements those years. So overall, if you flip the page to 26, our net income, we're estimating 2.7 this year and just a little over 2 million next year, 2021, the budget year. And then in the out years, you can see the changes, 22.4 to 2.6 million. So additional capital improvements in the 6 to 7 million, and then dropping down a little bit in the later part of the projection, and cash flows ranging between 15 million to 13 million through the projection, with a low on 22, 23 at 10. So that's the water budget summary. And I talked a little bit about the revenues there on page 27. And then again, if you flip the page to 28, or scroll down, however you're doing it, you'll see the expense schedules. And again, the things that I explained about the water division apply here. You'll see the new labor accounts and the changes in the 18.9 actual to what we're estimating this year and on through the budget. So any questions on these so far? If not, I can jump into the capital and we'll conclude the budget presentation. So for capital, if you go to starts on page 32, and largest expense we have is the purchase of water rights at 2.9 million for fiscal year 2021. a couple of distribution projects there. Highway 99 water main upgrade for $480,000 and a water main upgrade and replacement for $450,000. And then again, if you drop down to the next page, page 33, the facility related capital that applies to the water division, $402,000. That again is mostly the fuel station. So total anticipated fixed asset additions for the water division for 2021 is just a little over 6 million, with 4.5 being cash outlay for that. So estimated. So that's the budget presentation. I guess I will mention too, with respect to this being kind of our first step with the financial reporting by department project. Next is the execution of all of this in our general ledger, and so we're in progress on that. We have all the GL accounts created in the software, all the departments, and we've associated all the departments, the new departments, to all operating accounts for water and light. So that's all done. We're going to begin coding in this new way next month. So we'll be doing that ahead of the July start date on this, and we're in process on setting up other modules. I'll be meeting with, our department will be meeting with a gentleman from our software vendor tomorrow to again talk some more about setup in the different modules. So we're in progress on that. So once we get that going, the next thing we'll be doing is working with the department heads and procurement to kind of go through the changes and really do training on how to code in this new way. And we're also going to be working on developing budget to actual reporting so that department heads will be able to see how their expenses are, actually lining up against the budget that we have. So, and it'll be a fine-tuning process as we go. But we felt like this was a pretty good first stab at kind of out of the box what this is going to look like, and what just gives us a good shot at trying to put this into place. So,
Okay, good. Thank you.
mm-hmm.
Any other questions for Mark? Any comments?
So, Mr. Mayor, I would have to say this is a very impressive document, and it's very clear, and I love how it presents the information. And to me, also, the main thing to me is it shows the degree of transparency that we have. And it almost looks like a master class of how a well-run utility looks. And I was just really impressed with it.
Thank you, Patrick. Again, Mark, thank you. I know this has been a multi-year process with lots of hard work and getting us to a point where, like I said at the beginning, it's something that I can follow, where when I came on 4 years ago, 3.5 years ago, I really struggled to make sense of what the budget looked like. So thank you. Okay. Our next item is an update on electronic payments, and John will have you address the commission.
Yeah, good evening.
Good evening.
So in your packet, you'll find the memo that's the follow-up on the electronic payments. From the March 17th meeting, it was requested to bring back some numbers on some different ratios for the payment distribution. Didn't bring it last month. Last month a little crazy, so waited till this month to bring those back. So you'll see in that first slide, I wanted to include the slide from the last presentation in March. The numbers highlighted in red are the numbers that were used in that initial graph of the projections. So I wanted to include that one, just kind of bring back what we had before. And the one below it as well, the one that says March fees original, that was that original graph that showed the projected cost of the fees for the online, not just online transactions, but all transactions as it jumped from 25, 50, and 75%. Keeping in mind that that was just those numbers highlighted in red. So we moved the more expensive ones, in-office cash, in-office checks, mailbox drop checks toward electronic payments. So that kind of recaps from where we were back in March. So the next group is an updated the processing costs. I highlighted the other two, the bank bill pay and the smart bill, in red. So now all those payments were used in the submittal for the projection of costs. And so that total number of payments were used to get the distribution for the following slide, which is the revised fees. So with those other fees added, were a little less expensive. You can kind of see how that plays out with the 25% shift, the 50% shift, and the 75% shift, and then that black line. Not quite as the downward spiral that we were showing before, but a little bit more flattened out on that. And the numbers that I used to distribute that was, I took the total number of payments in the red, and each one, it was its own percentage. That's the amount I dropped each percentage. So that kind of is what I use for reference in that. The next slide I'd like to show you is one that's not in there. I had a question yesterday to try that without having cash involved. So I ran up another couple slides, and I'm going to share that on screen right now. So now you should see, hopefully everybody can see it. I think it's working.
Yep.
So once again, you'll see a repeat of that same slide, but now you'll see that the cash numbers are not highlighted. So I took those numbers in red and used those for this next projection. So here's those fees with no cash customers moving toward online payments. So you'll see we're still here, the blue and the red still unchanged in every slide, but as a 25% shift of payments without any cash customers moving, it's increasing about almost $2,000, probably about $1,400. And the 50% shift increases it a little bit more. And the 75% shift, you can see it's not quite as a slight increase, but it still is an increase a little bit there. So it does increase with those without including the cash, which is one of the highest transaction costs we have in the office, which we're not getting any of those in the office today. But believe it or not, we are still getting some cash payments in the drop boxes and even in the mail. So that's the slide that I wanted to share. Are there any questions on this new number or any of the others before?
Okay, quick one, John. So
Sure.
How are the cash customers paying now?
So as I mentioned before, we are still getting some cash payments trickled in. We have had a few customers call and say they're just not going to pay because that's the only way they want to pay. But most of them we're seeing either go to card or something online, or they're getting money orders. I would say we're seeing more money orders than we have. But as you can see with the numbers John introduced at the beginning, a lot more are going to online payments.
John,
Yes.
a comparison of cash and money orders when we're looking at our account analysis and costs from that perspective, are they about the same?
You mean as far as a transaction cost?
Yes.
A money order in the office, are you talking if a customer comes into the office?
Yeah, I'm talking about, as we see a change from cash to money orders and the cost the bank charges us.
Oh, I don't think they're basically treating it as a check.
Okay.
We actually, with our new Remit Plus system that you guys approved here some months back, where we're scanning all those and doing electronic deposits now, it is basically a check.
Okay.
Submitted in a group with all the rest.
John, this is Ed. When you talk cash, are you talking currency or are you talking checks and currency?
When I'm referring to cash in here, it is cold hard cash.
Okay. What's the largest amount one single person has brought in? Or do you know?
I would reference probably our grow operations. They tend to pay a lot in cash, and we've had 2,000 to 3,000 at one time at the counter.
Okay.
So,
And we've got the armored company coming by daily still.
So since we are not taking cash now, we have put a halt to the armored service. We've
Okay.
delayed it. The small amounts of cash that we are getting, we are just depositing in our safe. I think at the beginning of this process, not knowing where everything was going, we said, hey, maybe we should have some cash on hand. So we've just been dropping all that cash in our safe here. But it is nowhere near to what we were bringing in prior to the COVID emergency.
Okay.
so John, make sure I understand then.
Yes.
That if you assume that once this is over with and we're open, people who want to pay cash will pay cash and not make the changes, or not very many will make a change to credit cards, then does this mean that the cost will go from roughly $17,000 to either 21, 23, or 23.5, depending on how many people switch to credit cards?
Are you referring to the slide that I'm sharing up there right now?
Yes. Right.
So to make sure I understand your question, or maybe I can answer it by explaining the slide a little bit better.
Yeah.
So this slide with cash customers, we are in this slide, I'm assuming that no cash customer has changed. They are
Right.
still going to pay cash.
Yes. And so my question is, will the cost go from $19,280.42 a month to either $21,150, $22,806, or $23,648, depending on how many other people change to credit cards?
I think go ahead, John.
I think this shows what the credit card transaction, the no fee model. So this is $1.
Exactly. Yeah, if I understood staff wanted us to go no fee model. So if we did that,
okay,
if we stayed the same as we are now, and we assume everything else is the same, that cost would be, the cost to water and light would be $17,280. But if we switch to the no fee model, then the cost is either 21, 22,806 or 23,648. If we assume that either 25, 50, or 75% of the people change to credit cards, is that correct?
That is correct, with cash not being in those groups of the shift.
So that means that if only 25% of the rest of people change to credit cards, it'll cost us another almost $4,000 a month, right?
If you're referencing the 17,280.
Yeah, because that's apples and apples, isn't it?
Yeah, so the 17,280 is what in March 2019 we actually paid for fees, because we didn't absorb the cost and the customer paid the $395.
Right. But if we change to, we use that data from that month.
Correct.
And change to the no fee model, then it's going to cost us 20% more.
So yes, the 21,150 number is if 25% of those customers shifted to electronic payment based on those numbers in teal there.
Yeah. And so that's $50,000 a year almost, right?
Yeah, doing the numbers really fast, yeah.
Do we, and if we're doing cost of service, then we're going to spread that over everybody, right? And right, I mean, we have an extra cost. We allocate our costs, and we'll have to then raise revenue. I know we wouldn't adjust for $50,000, but at some point it'll get scooped up at that level, right?
Yes, but I think also part of it too is that slide on the original presentation was some of those customers moving to a time-saving, no transaction time interface with the customer service rep. saves the need of adding any of that, whether it be a half-time FTE or a full-time FTE.
So that would be from the check people changing, right? If we're assuming that there won't be a lot of change in cash, it would be the people who bring in the drop box and checks, right?
Yes.
And so we're going to avoid adding somebody, but that will be, I mean, if you look at these numbers, I'm looking at your previous slide, the one that shows the mail-in Dropbox checks, 31% of the payments cost us $1.56 a transaction, or $8,687 a month, right? So you're saying that we really we're going to save more than that? Is that your assumption, that we're going to save more than $1.56 because we're going to avoid the cost of more people?
Yes, down the road. Right now, we're probably pushing, of course, not when the office is closed. The amount of customers that come in when the office opens back up, we'll be pushing adding another individual. So some of the time savings from moving to some of these electronic payments was going to help save some of that. I'm not sure if that answers your question.
I think it does. I mean, I understand your point that there's a cliff, sort of, right?
Right.
At some point, you're going to end up having to go off that cliff, and then that extra few customers that we get checks from instead of credit cards are going to cost us a lot of money. But we're not really there yet, right?
No, we're not quite there.
So John, what would you add personnel, what exactly would they be doing?
So right now, it would just be alleviating some of the other strain on the other employees. Right now, service orders are more than a one-person job. Handling customers at the counter, obviously not right at the moment, but just all the customers that come in and are adding all these apartment complexes. They deal with engineering one time to set up, but they come and see us almost every month if they come into the office.
So we are increasing our number of accounts then is what's really driving it.
Yes.
Okay, I think that we should make that clear to the board that it's an increase in business, really.
Yeah, service points continue to increase.
So what is the ideal customer if you were redesigning everything?
The ideal customer when they pay their bill.
Yeah, I mean, what is the ideal payment of a bill? Is it ACH or?
To be honest, I think the online payment is ideal because the customer's in control of it. They can do it when they want, and there's no interaction from us.
But from you as the owner of this business, what's the best thing for you?
For me as the owner of this business, looking at the transaction costs, I still think it would point toward that.
Really?
The smart bill is our most popular behind mailed in checks. I would say the checks, any kind of payment like that where we have to hand key something in is prone to error, prone to getting put on a wrong account, whether they put their stub in with it or not. Anything that we can have the customer in control of making their own payment is not only easier, but saves the front office folks time.
So the ACH, is it the charge from the bank, or is it the time it takes the personnel to operate it, or is it both?
Now, when you say an ACH, are you referring to our smart bill program where we?
Or the automatic check, like I guess like my wife does ours. I think you send us a bill, but it's an automatic check withdrawal.
Right, and it probably comes out on like the 10th or the 25th.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Right.
so that's the smart bill program.
Okay.
So that is where we basically have the whole town divided into two halves. Depending on where you live is when we pull your money out. We do have set up for that where we have to enter customers' account numbers. With Smart Hub now, they can do that, but it is not a simple process. But once again, you are the payment is depending on when we're going to do it, and we're only going to do it for you on one date. So it's still out of control of the customer when that payment is made.
So there's
don't have
no
a choice.
no way that can be automated with the once the meter is read and it hits the account, it just can't, I mean, electronically operate, or?
No,
You still
because right now for that process to work, after time, all the accounts are set up with the information, the date they're going to withdraw. It's still a manually driven process on our end to start that process.
Is that same way as it other utilities?
This process that we're using, yes.
So PG has the same kind of crew doing the same thing we're doing then?
I don't think PGE has NIC software, but I would imagine there's some form
Okay.
of something they do with that, but
So it's our software that's dictating us to do this.
that is the process that was moving when I came up here, and
Okay.
So yeah, it's a process where we create a file, we apply it to customers' accounts, and then it creates a bank file. We submit that bank file to the bank, and then it processes on the day we choose.
And you're telling us the cheapest customer you have is the ones that they're paying with credit card because they're doing their own thing and not using staff?
That is the least transaction cost that we have in the office. I mean, as far as time goes.
Well, I'd be interested, I mean, in knowing as we go forward, there must be some bubble point to where, as much as I hate to say it, the credit card transaction will be cheaper than having personnel, maybe.
Well, and it may be just a factor of letting it be known. I mean, I don't know how you do it, but it's cheaper to us, if I'm listening to what John is saying, is to go credit card because there's manual backroom functionality to an ACH, where I thought that was completely automated and nobody was touching it.
I did too.
Yeah, so there, I mean, for the most part, it is, the more customers we have on that, the less time per customer is used, but it's still a manual process that we run three times, once at the beginning of the month, once at the end of the month, and we do one for the city at the very end of the month.
So John, from my perspective, again, it's just telling the story that, you know, that credit card usage is the new direction. I mean, everything I do is credit card other than Mac Water and Light. And I think Recology is another one that's pretty archaic in trying to pay that bill. I thought I had that on an automatic, but it's not happening. And so every 4 months I go in and says, oh, I have to pay my bill. It'd be late notice, you know.
Right.
Yeah,
Well, I think I was just going to say, I think another thing to remember too, with general service customers, we don't allow to use a credit card. We require them to be electronic check.
I wonder why.
And right now we are paying that $3.95 fee where before they were. On the no fee model, that turns into a 20-cent charge, regardless of the dollar amount on it. So I think that's something that we could do to really help business customers and push more of them toward that electronic check. That would drive, that would be one of our cheapest transactions at that point, then would be that electronic check.
Well, I know we're set up electronically to pay our fringe benefits to the union or to the trusts, and that's and several, we've got quite a few things to do electronically. So, I mean, this is really interesting. So I'd love to have us talk more about this, but I guess, Tom, for the resistance you and I've had for years, the model may be that as our cost of doing business get higher, credit cards become cheaper.
Yeah, I think it's the cliff, because I think that the $50,000 is not worth it at this point to make the change if we assume that we were back in the normal billing. But I think when we get to the cliff, we need to talk about it, because Ed and I'd be better off if we had, no fee credit cards to the customers, because we'd get another, I don't know, 500 miles a year or something on our Alaska cards. But
yeah,
I don't think the rest of the customers are better off if we do that. But I mean, the the first time this has made sense to me financially is when you explain the cliff, and when we get to that point, then I think we should revisit it. So maybe you could keep an eye on it, but, and then it's too bad we can't really make too many conclusions from what's happening now because people don't have the choice to go into the office.
Sure.
So the no fee model now is different.
Well,
But
I think right now we're seeing what the customer as a whole sees when they pay that $395, and I think that's that $395 transaction fee that we're absorbing right now.
yeah, no, and that's unfortunately high. I would prefer it if we could find a way to do that cheaper for the customer, but as I understand it, we can't do that without becoming a credit card processor ourselves, which we don't want to do.
Well, it'd be interesting next time somebody goes to conference to see what's in the marketplace with software and just to talk to some other utilities. How are you doing it? And if our limitation is NCIS, then we should tell them that and see what they come up with.
Yeah, I think we've done enough with software for a while after what we did to Mark with the budget.
Mark did that to himself.
No, I think we did.
You wrote all those new general ledger codes.
Our request, I think.
I think he asked for permission.
Can I ask you to clarify that last comment you made just on the fee?
Cliff?
Not the cliff. You made a comment of just how you were understanding being a credit card processor.
Yeah, that one of our that we've gone through this program, but another choice I think would be for us to say, okay, we'll process the credit card stuff ourselves. And I think there were two problems with that. One, it was going to be, and charge the customer, but it was going to be expensive for us to set it up. But also then we have all sorts of liability issues with the credit card information.
Okay.
So that was the concern. So I don't think we want to do that.
Okay, I got what you're saying. That's where we would be on the fee model, but we would be charging the fee to the customer.
There may be some liability issues that the insurance provider carrier may not like with that either, too.
Right.
Yeah. Okay. Well, thank you.
Good. Thank you. This is great. I really appreciate this.
I mean, and if we need to vote, we can, but I don't think we're at the point now where it makes sense to impose the $50,000 cost on the other customers. No. But I can see where that could come, and I would appreciate if staff would keep us posted on that. But I mean, the rest of the commission may want to vote on it now. I don't know.
No.
I can keep track of numbers. I can keep track of numbers and bring back on a period basis if you guys would like.
That'd be great. Thank you, John.
Yeah, you're welcome.
So John, that's going to be called the Cliff.
The Cliff follow-up.
You can send us a Cliff note. Like,
right.
From our college days.
Yeah. Well, thank you, John.
Thank you. You guys have a good evening.
Thanks, John.
Good.
Stay safe.
Our next item in new business would be the extension policy agreement and easement, and either John or Sam, I don't know which one is going to take this.
Sam's going to take it to start.
All right. So what you see in your packet is you see a series of draft documents, a draft extension policy, and then followed by extension agreement, one for electricity, exhibit, I believe exhibit 1, exhibit 2, an extension agreement for water, and then a form of easement. These documents are intended to be used for extension of electric service and water service into new areas, some large areas, large subdivisions, or small extensions. So they ranges, the size is quite wide. These documents are specifically, these type of documents are used extensively in our engineering department, really at the, primarily at the field engineer level, in interaction with customers, again, from property owners to property developers and contractors. Our current form of extension agreement was adopted by the commission back in 1994. We really don't have a form of extension policy. So what we have right now is we have form agreements and we have a form of easement that is used and has been used really since it was at first adopted in 94. In 94, the commission adopted a couple of different forms, a long form and the short form of extension agreement for different situations. The long form over the course of probably the next 5 years up until the early 2000s was used somewhat, but it was, I think it was used with, as I read the historic record, with some difficulty. And in the early 2000s, or by the early 2000s, it seems that Water and Light had primarily transitioned to using primarily the short form. And the short form has been used really for since the early 2000s, and really the long form hasn't been used. And that's, as I observe it, as sort of, looking at the record, it seems like that was a question of functionality mostly, and decisions made probably primarily by general managers to go to the short form. Again, what you see in front of you are drafts. These drafts have been worked on really for probably over a year. We started with the current short form agreements. We looked at other utilities. We took a hard look at what UWeb had. They have a policy. We tried to kind of adapt that to our situation, and also just primarily describe in both the policy and in the agreements what we actually do. So a lot of time spent with staff. I've spent a lot of time with staff asking them, well, how does this work? What does this mean? You use this term, how does that work? And so trying to draft through it and come up with something that we could put in front of you as a draft to view and actually just put out in the public realm for viewing. So tonight really is we're not asking you to adopt anything, but we want to get this in front of you so you can start to give us feedback. I can tell you there was an effort back in 2006, 2007 to do this very thing that kind of fizzled, because I think as I look again at the record of it, it seems like it sort of fizzled out of sort of a frustration of drafting. So hopefully we don't get stuck in that again. But I guess what I'm kind of hoping for is sort of some general direction about how to go forward. I know that I've already had a conversation with Commissioner Tankersley about the forms of document. And I guess if you all as a commission, you could attack this different ways. You could do it sort of individually and give staff, probably through me, feedback. You could do it as a group. We could have a workshop. There's different ways we could do it, but drafting can be a bit of a challenge. And I appreciate the patience staff has shown with me as I've tormented them with these documents. I see a smile on Scott's face. So yeah. But anyway, I guess that's what I'm looking back for, is some feedback from the commission as to how you like to move forward. I think the documents probably do still need some work, and probably some additional sort of some more drafting and some more review from staff, not just me, but probably from the line staff. Anyway, I'll stop talking and let you ask questions.
Ed?
I guess the first thing I want to say is that we have these two policies, but it's really kind of apples and oranges, in that the line extension, we have a geographic area designated by the state that we provide services to. And I'm used like, what's the subdivision way up Peavine, Eagle Point Ranch? That's kind of, is that the furthest to Scott, our furthest thing west, kind of?
Pretty close. Our line actually extends.
So, and that's way outside the city limits and that. So I think the electric has a world outside the city.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
But is there anything, Sam, that makes this water be clearly inside the city limits? Because we still have a moratorium in place on the urban growth boundary, don't we?
Yeah, we saw the 2006 resolution that limits water service outside the city still operates. And I'm not sure if I'm answering your question or not, but one of my first questions for our engineering staff was, why do we have two agreements? And, should these be consolidated into one agreement? And I kind of came to find out that they really do operate. It seems to work to have an electric agreement and a water agreement, because as you pointed out, there are
Yes,
a lot of times when we are extending just electricity into an area, and our water, it just seems like we have two different water engineering group, a water engineering group and electricity engineering group, and so they can almost work. They work in tandem, but they also work sort of independent of each other. So so it seems to work for these agreements to be separate. Water doesn't generally extend outside the city. I think that's correct.
And so, I mean, I want to make sure that in this document, it's clear that this has to be. So in
Yeah,
your
it's
first
not,
rough draft, you're clear in your mind, or Tom, if you've looked at it in detail, that you've got to be within the city limits to have any kind of water extension.
I hadn't thought about that part of it, Ed, frankly. But you perhaps, just to make it clear, we could do something in it that in the policy to say that, the extension agreements will only be granted consistent with other policies or something like that.
Well, I mean, I'll give you a good example. I don't want Bart Abrams showing up to our front door because he's found out we got some new deal and he wants to buy water from us.
right, and this is not, it's not intended to be a new deal. And right now we have extension agreements that I don't think address that specifically. Really, what you're talking about is that resolution, that 2006 resolution that specifically says we don't go outside the city except
Right.
for
So I think everything in this needs to kind of focus on that, or I mean, this should just be a mirror of that, with all the language in there, that we don't have any loopholes in here that somebody might be able to overturn that resolution.
So Sam, you could say, to make it so it's even clearer, something like it's subject to our other policies and including but not limited to that resolution prohibiting extension outside the city limits. And
right, and yes, that's true, and that's driven by your decisions, and not unlike the Oregon Public Utility Commission drives our district for electricity. So yeah, we do have a district we operate.
Because I use my example, I think Yam Hill has 16 different water districts it provides water to. Some are 2 and 3 houses, that kind of thing, and they're awful hard to manage. And when they run out of water, and they do run out of water, who do they shut off?
Ed, I actually found it on page 1 of the policy, section 1.2. I think Sam's already dealt with it.
Okay, 1.2, Tom.
Yeah.
Again, I don't have a very good memory. Maybe it's in there and I just don't remember it.
Well, it said,
oh yeah, 2006-12, right,
Yeah.
C resolution.
Yeah.
Right, that's it right there.
Okay, so you have this embedded in this document.
Yeah, it's actually the resolution.
I'm looking at page 1, so where do I go from page 1?
section 1.2, page 1 of the document, of the extension policy, Ed. So it's the second page of the section here. It says McMinnville Water and line extension policy.
So this must be is it an exhibit?
No, it's the one right after the memo,
So it's page 2.
immediately following the memo.
Okay, I'm sorry. So I finished with electric. I'm now.
No, go way to the beginning.
The very beginning of the, okay.
Of the whole thing. Go to the memorandum.
Okay, all right. Totally different doc. Okay, I was looking at his work. Okay.
So this
One
is
point. Okay, yeah.
And Sam and John and I've already talked.
I see. Yeah, at one point I see it. Resolution 2006-12. Okay.
Sam and John and I've already talked about making the line extension agreement that you sign with people expressly subject to and subordinate to the policy. So that's another reason to do that and make sure that this applies.
Okay, great. That would be my big issue. So, okay. So Sam, you want us to take a look at these and give you back, send you an email with our thoughts on it then? Is the best way?
Yeah, certainly that would work. And if you individually want to look at it and give me your feedback, I can incorporate those comments in the document, probably revisit that with our engineering group.
I'll probably send Trina an email saying, okay, Trina, how do I print this? Because I like to have paper and red ink. So, but Trina, expect an email from me.
I found it very useful to talk to Sam and John about how this actually works and to kind of walk through to make sure that the document reflects how it works and how it and that it works for us, works for our people putting extension agreements in, but also that is a good guide for staff. More than once they told me how competent the existing people are that are doing it, but everybody knows we have succession planning to do, and I wanted to make sure that they would have a template here. One thing that was helpful to me for the rest of you was when I looked at the exhibits to the extension agreements to see what exactly we were doing, what they're doing, and what we're getting paid for. So I think that's helpful, and I think it'd be given your history of being on top of the costs and what we're doing, what we're getting paid for. I think it'd be useful for you to look at that and maybe talk to them about if you do sign one of these agreements, what does it mean? So what
Sam wants to do is have to put up with me again. So, okay.
No, and
right. So.
Yeah, Commissioner Tankersley's correct. We could set up a time to a Zoom call or something to walk through the document with any of you. If you want to go through the document, give us feedback or ask questions.
Well, I found.
I like your coffee in the building, but that's right. It's gone half the time.
And Sam, I found this to be very enlightening to me as I read through it. My background isn't in contract law or that type of thing. So, I definitely need to have some training and some dialogue around this. And if we do it as a group, it doesn't matter, but.
So Mr. Mayor, to Sam, does any part of this document go with the deeds or the easements we file and stuff? Does any of this end up at the courthouse?
Well, the easement document, so there's a form of easement, which is Exhibit 3, I think, to the policy. And that's a form of easement that would be recorded. We quite often, Water and Light takes easements from customers, usually for smaller developments, usually not the big development, because usually in those big developments, utilities are going into public utility easements, you're going into the right of way. And Scott or James jump in if I'm saying something incorrect. But I think it's mostly the smaller developments where we're going across private property or commercial developments where we're going in bigger properties and we take an easement to guarantee our access to the meter or something for the lines. So, but those are recorded. We did, in this document, this current form, we did try to address some things that have given us have been a little bit of a head scratcher these recent years. Things like we put in something about gates and having gates. I think we addressed a little bit more in landscaping, but there, it's a form. So if we have to do something outside the form, we might have to come to you and ask for your blessing. But it's intended to kind of reach the average situation.
Okay, so let me give you a couple of real world examples. There's an empty piece of ground, we'll say in front of the housing authority. Somebody wants to put an office building in there, and they just really need a fire service and they need a domestic water service, maybe irrigation meter or something. Historically, Water and Light often would provide all that. But I think that today now we probably require an extension agreement for just getting a meter and a vault and stuff for the fire system. Or John, maybe you can, or James. How do we do that? I think of a development. I think that makes lots of sense. But what do we do on lots that end up needing our services? Where does you have to have a developer then? Or somebody acts as a developer, having the city main tapped, or are we still providing those services?
Who wants-
Who wants to tackle that one?
It's a pretty common thing that happens in town, so.
Well, it's a case by case basis on some of those, but mostly the extension agreement for water is for the larger for the larger extensions. You're talking
But
like,
I can remember some small pieces that I'd have to sign a extension agreement for, because that was
really-
the model. Have we
yeah,
changed
really-
that then?
yeah, it really comes down to, do you need an easement? What are they putting in? What's the level of effort there? Are they extending our service line? So like in a housing development, that's going to trigger an
Yeah,
extension.
no, I understand that, but let's say an office building being built on an infill lot downtown or somewhere, it's gonna be on a case by case basis, and okay. I mean, and I understand.
Because there's a lot of times where we would just, the main might run right in front of that building.
Correct.
And so it's, or if, let's just say it's an infill lot for a house, where all you're running is a secondary service where we wouldn't get an easement. We would not get an extension agreement for something like that.
Okay.
The way I understand it, I'm sort of an onlooker in this process. I'm the question guy, but the way I understand it is, when it's infrastructure we own, we like to have easements. When it's
Makes
a
sense.
pad for a transformer or something, we're only, once we get past the meter, then the question is, do we need it for connectivity to the next guy? And if we don't need it for connectivity to the next property, then it becomes iffy. Do we need to put a pole in? Do we need it, or do we have a pole, or do we have to, is there some other thing we need to serve the customer? Then maybe we want an easement for that. I think that's why the bigger commercial stuff gets easements sometimes.
Okay, well, I'd want us to stay customer friendly. That's my concern with all this. So we don't make these so unwieldy that, we're part and parcel of government, so we can do that. So I just want us to be careful about making these nice and user friendly, and not make the process be a real ugly thing for somebody to have to knock on the front door and say, I want to hook up water. So.
Well, you probably remember the contractor revolt we had in 2007 then.
Oh, yes, John.
Yeah.
I don't think you were the boss then. But
No, I
anyway,
wasn't, but.
you got the emails. Yeah, no, I do.
So.
But I think it's also important that we have control over the infrastructure that we're going to have to maintain and use for the next 50 years or 100 years. So
Exactly.
if they're putting pipes in, that then the customer is going to look to us if the pipe breaks. We need to deal with that.
Yeah, and what I'm talking about are these small infill things that
Yeah, well then.
We as a company, I'm not talking, Water and Light as a company, handling subdivisions, all that, that's kind of what this is all about. It's some of the tricky ones can be needing water on some corner lot because they're building a 2-story office building or something. Those get tricky. And so I just don't want us to lose our nice, soft way we have of dealing with stuff.
And a lot of times the problem with those lots is there's no space to put the infrastructure.
Yep, exactly.
So do we want to have a Zoom meeting to talk about this, or do people want to talk to Sam individually? I'm happy to do either way.
I'm fine with Zoom. Well, okay, I wrote myself a note early in the night. I serve on the hospital board also, and we're going to have our first person-to-person meeting this Friday because of the 25-person rule, kind of like church. So what do we want to do as a board? Do we want to continue to meet and not be in contact with each other, or do we want to see each other? Because I think it's a heck of a lot easier if Sam was in his office and John's, and we go sit in the conference room and we maintain social distance and stuff. And
well, the other thing to remember is we don't have to do this, right away. We have some time. But I would recommend we wait a little bit to see how phase 1 goes before we start meeting in groups again. If
okay.
Phase 2, then I would say we should start looking at that.
Okay.
I agree, John.
Only reason I bring it up is because that's what the hospital
Right.
was doing. So.
Well, we have linemen and they have doctors. That's the difference, Ed.
Well, I will tell you that the hospital is the last place I want to be.
Yes.
Coming through the front door and you rub elbows with somebody that's sicker than hell.
Yeah.
Hello. So, and they don't let, I got a key to the back door and they won't let me come in the back door anymore out there. So. Okay, so Sam, then I'll print this out myself and kind of go through it and glean it over the next couple of weeks and maybe send you an email.
Right. I think preliminarily, if any of you have questions about it or want to read through it and have questions, it might be helpful if you want to contact me and I can kind of walk you through parts of it. Because you may have questions I can't answer. They may be questions that'll have to be answered by either Scott or James or one of their engineers.
Sure, and I understand, but I'm looking at Patrick and thinking about the fiber system. Does the electrical easement setup take care of all the things related to fiber?
Well, that's an interesting question because there's not.
Sorry, I mentioned it.
Yeah, it doesn't call out extension of fiber service. That's a kind of a whole, that's a kind of another whole nother can of worms. Whether that's something the commission wants to entertain. I can tell you from looking at old files, it was something you guys thought about years ago, but hasn't really happened in the same way that water and electricity get extended.
Well, interesting times we're in. Has everybody had a chance to look at this magazine by any chance, Tom?
I didn't see that one, no.
This is our Northwest Public Power Bulletin. And there's an article in here about this. It's
Idaho Falls.
Idaho Falls, yeah, John.
Yep.
This guy they moved there. A couple moved there from Vegas, and he needed high-speed internet because of the work he was doing, or access, or something like that. And so there's the local provider and the utility got together to bring a bunch more power in, so to speak, not capacity in. And I'm thinking about, here we are, we're experiencing this change in lots of people's lives, more people working from home, and will there be an issue with capacity and everybody, their home offices having the ability to accept, have a lot of power. I mean, Patrick could speak better to this than I can, but I got to think that some companies could be figuring out that if they're able to operate without having people in the office, that maybe they're going to downsize the office, pay premiums, and people stay at home working, and they meet sometimes once a month in a conference room in a hotel or something. Anyway, I think we're going to see some different changes in how people live and how we function as companies.
Yeah, and the other thing about this, having a policy, an extension policy, which is sort of a generic thing that applies to both water and electricity, theoretically, you could apply it. You could come up with a fiber extension policy and attach to it as an exhibit and say, okay, this applies, same definitions.
Okay.
You can change this document. It's not a static document.
Okay.
Any further discussion then?
No, good discussion. Thank you all very much.
Thank you, guys.
Okay, let's move on to the intergovernmental agreement with the city of McMinnville on the Old Sheridan Road project. And James, we'll turn it over to you.
All right, good evening. So this is the second intergovernmental agreement we have with the city in regards to the Old Sheridan Road project. The first one was executed in January 2020. And that was for design and construction support services. That's been completed. So at that point, we went out, worked with the city, and they went out to bid on March 18th for an invitation to bids. In the bid schedule, they had, in the bid package, they have two schedules. Schedule A, which is the city portion, and Schedule B, which is McMinnville Knights portion of the project there. So when they went out to bid, they received the bids on April 16th. We had 8 bids that were submitted. The city portion was $3,755,223.20. And then Schedule B, which is McMinnville Water Knights portion, was $305,933. So I have on the memo there, I broke it out into a table so we can see how the ranking went there. That based on our discussions and how we've done these agreements in the past, it's the total bid amount. That's the one we accept. So the city awarded to K&E Excavation for a total of $461,156.20.
There's like $1,700 difference on $4 million worth of work. Wow.
There is. It was very close bids. It was something else. And if you look at the engineer's estimate, it's pretty impressive also how close they were with the amounts there. So overall, very close. I did want to note, we talked about it a little bit last time at the last commission meeting. I thought the table would kind of illustrate it a bit better. In Schedule B, you see, K&E was number 4 for Schedule B. There's about a $23,000 difference between Emery and Sons, which was the low bid for Schedule B, and K&E Excavating for their schedule. And where that breakdown really comes into it, from like what I can interpret it on it, is this the MOB and demob within the project there. So that's
Well,
what
this is a good way to do this project.
it is. It's a very good way. There's lots of cost benefits to it for both, for McMinnville Water and I at least.
Fair money and step back.
Absolutely. So with this, we'd also like commission to approve an additional 20,000 for a change order, and that change order is for pavement restoration. Our crews, McMinnville Water Night crews, were out there and we replaced a portion of the water main, which falls within this project scope and limits. We upsized it from a 10-inch to a 12-inch, from Cypress to Goucher, and basically there's a patch there that needs to be replaced. Talking with the city, it makes sense for both of us just to include it in the project. There's a cost savings to us to do that. Asphalt costs are going to be much less going through this project here versus going out with a patch. And then also it reduces the redundancy of, if we fill that patch up to the top, they're going to come in and grind out top 2 inches of it. So it just makes sense to go this route.
I'm with you. Yeah.
Okay. So with that being said, we'd like to move forward here and have commission adopt the resolution for approving the IGA with the city of McMinnville, and also authorize and approve funding for the construction change order in amount not to exceed $20,000 for additional pavement restoration.
Okay.
Any further questions?
No.
Sam, could you read this by title only?
Sure, that's resolution 2020-14, a resolution authorizing and approving an intergovernmental agreement between the city of McMinnville and the city of McMinnville acting by and through its Water Light Commission regarding construction of the old Sheridan Road project.
Patrick, you waved your hands. Was that a motion?
I think it was.
Okay, moved by Patrick, a second.
Second, and the motion was not only the IGA, but also the
The
change.
20 grand. Yeah, that's correct.
The second,
It's been moved and seconded. Trina, could you poll the commission?
Mayor Hill,
Yes?
Commissioner Tankersley,
yes.
Commissioner Gormley,
Yes.
Commissioner Fuchs.
Yes.
Resolution 2020-14 passes unanimously. Thank you. That's going to take us to our executive session. And I guess we'll have a few people drop off. Thad, you'll be coming on. Or how, is that how we do it, Trina?
Yeah, so, yep. We'll go into executive session pursuant to ORS 192-6602F to consider information and records that are exempt from public disclosure under ORS 192-501 sub 2-3 relating to identifying security measures, individual building, and information processing.
Okay,
So
before we
will
open,
go.